So something I run across a lot is people getting the wrong end of the stick with all sorts of things. So there are so many things out there that are really great, beautiful ideas, which if you take it the wrong way could actually be really harmful. So one of those things that I want to talk about today is the advice to just be yourself. I've come across this advice a lot. I've been seeing it since I was a child. I've seen it in media like TV shows, movies, real life. This advice gets given out a lot. The problem with this advice is that people take it to mean something that it doesn't. So let's have a little look at what it means and how to use that in a useful way, and what it doesn't mean, the common ways that people use it to mean something that it doesn't mean, and then it's very destructive for them. So just be yourself. People don't just go around saying that in normal day-to-day life to somebody who seems perfectly fine and okay and is being themselves. That advice is specifically given out to somebody who is expressing anxiety or worry, or they're being perceived as being anxious or worried. I've seen it actually recently on a dating app that I'm on. I'm single at the moment, and I'm on one dating app. And on this dating app, when you fill in your profile, so you can have your photos, you can have a little bio, which is just like a few sentences about whatever you want to say about yourself. And then you can choose some questions from like a huge long list of questions. You can choose a few or none or one or whatever. You choose them, a little box opens up and you can answer that question. And I keep seeing this advice, just be yourself, in answer to the question, the way to my heart is. The way to my heart is by just being yourself. By just being yourself. The way to my heart is by just being yourself. That strikes me as bizarre, because I think when I see that, I think, well, yeah, that's a given. I am just myself, but how self-aware are you? Because if anyone who is just themselves had the key to your heart, that's a lot of people with keys to your heart. I would be concerned about somebody who gives over their heart to anyone who's just themselves. They're going to be constantly giving their heart over. Maybe that's okay, but maybe not the thing that I'd be looking for in a potential partner. Just be yourself. I've seen this a lot in response to people who are anxious. So sitcoms, for example, where a child has to go on a date with someone. Actually, it comes up a lot in a dating context, or in an interview context, or in some sort of context where people often feel they're being judged by others. So giving a speech or presentation or doing a performance, meeting someone for the first time. In that context, this advice comes up a lot, just be yourself. And the subtext is relax. Don't worry. You're going to be okay. You have everything you need. And within yourself, there are aspects of you that are so uniquely you and so interesting. You have gifts and talents and strengths that are uniquely yours. And if you relax in a way and stay connected to that, instead of worrying about what other people will think of you, just stay connected to your best traits and strengths, and you'll be absolutely fine. That's what the subtext is. That's what it means. But it takes a lot longer to say all of that. And so instead, people say, just be yourself. Just be yourself. You don't have to try so hard. You don't have to try. But this gets taken the wrong way, because you don't have to try so hard often gets interpreted as you don't need to make an effort. You don't have to put in any energy or creativity. That's not what that means. You don't have to try so hard does not mean don't put in effort. You get out of a relationship what you put in. So if you want a really great, interesting relationship, the key is you need to be great and interesting. You put that energy in, and that will start creating that. Hopefully the other person will do that too, and then together you make a great, interesting relationship. On the other hand, if you arrive wanting a great and interesting relationship and you're completely and utterly bored, and so what you're bringing to it is this sort of boredom, this bored, passive, entertain me kind of vibe, chances are pretty good that that's not that attractive. Not to me anyway, and I think to a lot of people that's not immediately attractive. So you're going to be honing in on the people who are okay with that and who are drawn to that. But most of the time what you're going to encounter is these really boring, uninteresting encounters, because that's what you're putting in. And so you don't need to try so hard. Does not mean don't put in effort. It means use your effort and energy in a different direction. You don't use that effort and energy, you don't use that all up to be concerned about what they're thinking about you. That's not what that effort and energy is. That's not the best use of your effort and energy, being concerned about other people's opinions. The best use of your effort and energy is showing up in your value, showing up in your truth, in the best aspects of who you are and how you want to be. So do you want to be, what do you want to embody? What characteristics? What do you want to bring? Do you want to bring fun, playfulness, insight, wisdom, compassion, joy, peace, openness, vulnerability, honesty? Do any of those resonate with you? When you hear those things, do you think, yeah, I would love to embody that. I would love to embody that. Do you want to be present? Do you want to embody being interested and curious and caring, loving I might have said that one already. That is where you put your energy. So, like, you don't have to try so hard. Doesn't mean don't make an effort. Make an effort. Make an effort. Okay, let's look at the other ways that this advice, just be yourself, gets taken the wrong way and can be really harmful. Well, you may have heard people respond to this advice, just be yourself, with basically saying that's not helpful. Saying, well, what does that even mean? What does it even mean to just be myself? What does that mean? Because that's why that's bad advice. It's like really ambiguous. It doesn't clearly give direction. It doesn't clearly give something for someone to work with. Because, I just had to go run downstairs and open the door. But anyway, so just be yourself. In order to interpret what that means, a lot of people kind of start with, well, who am I? What does it mean to be myself? And all of us have got a story about ourselves. And often that story about ourselves is not good for us. It's not serving us. It's keeping us stuck in things that we don't want to be stuck in. So suppose your story is, I'm just too nice and people take advantage of me. That's not a great, is that story serving you? Does that make anyone really happy? That story, if that's your story, then just being yourself means having more of that. What if your story is along similar lines? I can't say no to people. What if your story is, I just feel guilty all the time. I feel guilty for letting people down. What if that's your story about who you are? What if you're like, that's just who I am? Or what if your story is, I can't stop working, I'm a workaholic? What if your story is that you're an addict? That you're addicted to unhealthy things or consuming things in unhealthy quantities? That's more the issue, isn't it? So suppose your story is that you're addicted to smoking or binge drinking or binge anything, binge eating or junk foods, or addicted to, I don't know, something just popped into my head, but I don't think I can say it in this video. But yeah, suppose your story is that you're addicted to things. Or suppose your story about yourself, about who you are, is that, well, I just can't control myself. When I get really angry about this or the other, I say things that I regret. I say really hurtful things. What if that's your story? And then what if the meaning you give to that is, I just suck. I'm just not a very good person. Just be yourself. Is that helpful? Yeah, just be like that. So that's why this is terrible advice. It's this idea that yourself can be a defined sort of story. We all carry stories about ourselves that we hang on to. And you know what your story about yourself is by looking at your life. You know, is your story, I make friends easily? Is your story, I surround myself with great people? Is your story, I always work for a crappy boss? Is your story, there's always drama in the lives of everyone around me? There's always so much drama in my life that gets brought there by other people. I can't do anything about it. It's other people. Is that your story? If that is your story of who you are, it's really, really bad advice to dwell on this idea, well, just be yourself. Because in that moment, when that negative pattern is repeating, that is a part of your story. Whether it's, I hate doing that, that's just me. I just hate housework. I'm just really bad with meeting new people. Like, if that's your story about who you are, it's not that helpful to say, just be yourself. And so the important thing to recognize here is that advice, just be yourself, it doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't literally mean be who you think you are. That's not what it means. It means instead of being concerned about what other people think of you, be more concerned about connecting with the values in yourself that you love about yourself and that you want to embody. Be more concerned about that. Instead of being concerned about other people's judgments, be more concerned about expressing and communicating the things you need to express and communicate openly, honestly, bravely, courageously. So, instead of the story, people take advantage of me and I always end up picking up the pieces of people's lives. They always dump all their stuff on me, and that takes up all my time and energy. Instead of that, that's not what being yourself is. That's just a pattern that's coming from a story in your life about yourself that needs to change. So instead of that, you can have something like, I set clear boundaries and I speak my truth with love, kindness, gentleness, and I protect my time and my energy, again, with love and kindness. So this, and then you look at what that might look like in terms of a practical action. So if you change your story to that, you're going to behave very differently when people come to you with their demands or their needs in the moment. You're going to prioritize what you need, because that's who you're responsible for. You're not responsible for the other people. You're responsible for yourself. So if you change these stories about yourself, your life changes. Every frustrating situation in your life is linked to a story that you have about yourself that isn't serving you. I want to say that again because it's so important. Every situation in your life that is frustrating and difficult is also connected to a story that you have that is not serving you. A story about yourself, a story about life, a story about others. As soon as you change those stories, I'm not saying the challenges and the difficult situations all go away, but your emotions within that situation change. If someone if someone you know has a habit of ringing you up and being distraught and then taking it out on you, saying hurtful things or shouting, they have this habit of doing this all the time, and you're getting really upset and frustrated about that, the story that you probably have around that probably has to do with, I wish they wouldn't do that, I can't make them stop. No wonder you're frustrated. If you're wishing someone would change but they're not gonna, that is frustrating. If you're wishing the reality were different from what it is, you are going to feel frustrated. But if your story is more like, okay, they are who they are, and they are doing what they do as an expression of where they're at, who they are, what their limitations are. And I can set boundaries, and I can choose how much of this to let into my life. I can choose how I engage with this person. If that's your story, that's a very different feeling. Do you feel the difference? You know, it's the same situation, but it's a different story. It's the same situation, but it's a different emotion. You still don't like somebody yelling at you and taking things out on you, but you don't have to experience that same frustration at wishing they would stop. And you can, in that moment, embody what it means to take care of yourself, serve yourself, to listen to yourself, to understand what your needs are, and then to step up and provide for yourself what you need. So, I've got an example actually from a recent session with a client. She was saying that sometimes when she's got teenage daughters, and sometimes when an issue arises with one of her daughters and then it impacts her going to work and she's late, and then she lets them know, oh, I'm sorry I'm late, this is going on. Often her colleagues will just give her loads of advice. They'll say stuff like, oh, well, you shouldn't let her do this, you should do it this way. It's loads of advice, and in that moment she doesn't feel good. She doesn't like hearing this advice. She doesn't want this advice. But because they give it to her, she then feels that she's being judged. And then she goes from there to the meaning, oh, I am a bad mother. They're judging me. These are their judgments. I'm a bad mother. So that whole sequence of things. So the event is, challenging things happening with her daughter. It impacts how she comes in for work, and then she's getting this unwanted advice. Like those events in the day, like the day that happened for her last week, she had a really hard day. That was her experience, this is just a really hard day, and then it impacted the rest of her day. It put her in that state. She carried that emotion and those meanings for the rest of the day. When people have these sorts of hard, challenging experiences again and again and again, what they don't realize is that the answer is not clearing their life so they never have to experience anything like that. So they start to never work in a place where they're in contact with people working there who are like that, or they change workplaces to somewhere where people don't respond in that way, or to try to, make things like that never happen with her daughter. Like, that's not the solution. The solution is not to control the events that are happening in your life. People who experience life as a very challenging experience all the time often will look at people who don't seem to have those exact same challenges and go, oh, well, life is so easy for them. Life is easy for them. They don't have this challenge that I have, or this, and they've experienced this differently. And then because their focus is on the external circumstances, and they're not making the connection between what's happening externally and what they're doing. Now, I'm not saying everyone is responsible for the crap that happens. Like, if you are driving down the road and somebody drives into you, crashes into you, I'm not saying, you driving down the road caused that accident to happen. That is not what I'm saying. But you could be driving down the road, somebody could hit your car, and the meaning you give to that could be, these things always happen to me. My life is a mess. Life is too stressful. I can't cope with this stuff. I'm already maxed out, and this is just too much to handle. That could be the meaning you give to that. And when you hear those statements, when you hear me say those statements, what do you feel? What do you think? What state do you think that might put me in if that were the meaning I were giving to that event? The stories that we create and the meanings that we make create our experience. And I'm not saying, so this is not going to be new for a lot of people hearing this. So this might not be new for you. A lot of people will hear that and try, and if you're taking it on board and if you're trying to apply that, you might jump to the wrong conclusions and you go, oh, well, that means look on the bright side all the time. So a car has collided with you and you can think like, do you know what? Well, at least I'm alive. I shouldn't complain. I should just be grateful that I'm alive. I should. You can do that. But that's not necessarily the most empowering meaning either. You've got to look for the meanings that serve you. If a part of that meaning, at least I'm still alive, I should be grateful. If a part of that meaning is actually I can't give myself space to feel and process and acknowledge how traumatic that was for me, that experience of being hit and everything that came up in the moment and and maybe you sustained some injuries, and the injury and how it's affecting my life, I can't give myself space to feel those things. I don't deserve sympathy for that, because if I don't want to wallow in that, I just want to be positive about this. If that's the meaning you take from it, if that's your story, again, that's not serving you. The story that serves you is not about ignoring what's happened. or to always need to put a positive spin on things. That's not what it means to have a story that serves you, but it means look for the truth in the situation. Look for the truth that makes you feel loved, supported, accepted, and connected with your strength and your resources. Look for that. When you find that story, as you practice looking for those stories, you'll get better at it. But there's this process of just practicing it. So for example, I always find examples really useful, so I'll try to give you an example about that, what stories you could make from like a situation you've been driving, someone has hit you, your car's been mangled, you've got some injuries, it's impacting stuff. And the story you can take out of that is just to look at what happened neutrally, just facts, not saying this is good or bad, but look at what happened just from a factual point of view, not from like an emotional point of view, but kind of like, I was driving this morning and was in a car accident, and that came as a big surprise to me. That's a big shock, and I need to process that shock. I've been shaken up by this, and I also need to figure out the best way to deal with my life going forward and to deal with the impact of the event. So you can acknowledge what is true and what is there. You can acknowledge things like, this is really hard on me right now. This is a lot to manage. But you can also ask yourself the questions like, who do I want to be in this circumstance right now? How do I want to show up? How do I want to be able to deal with all this toughness? And this is where you can use the power of your imagination to support you. So you can think about this and go, oh, if the person I most admire, the person who I would most want to be like, who I think is just amazing, were in my shoes right now, how might they react? How do I want to react? How do I want to respond? How do I want to be? So, dealing with these things that I need to deal with now, I want to make good decisions. I want to make wise decisions where I'm still taking care of myself. So your story can be, I'm in a tough situation right now, but I'm in a tough situation right now, but I am stronger than I know. I am more powerful than I know. I can ask for help. I can share openly about this and my experience. You can ask yourself things like, what can I learn from this experience? How can I grow here? Yeah. You can use your imagination to support your healing. You can think thoughts like, my body is amazing. All the trillions of cells in it working 24/7 to serve me, to keep me alive. My body's amazing. And in my current state where healing needs to happen, my body is working so hard to heal me. My brain is incredible, my imagination is incredible, and it supports my healing process in ways that I can't even imagine. It's so incredible and amazing. So do these stories feel a little bit different? What does it mean to just be yourself? That advice means be more concerned about honoring and serving your needs, who you are, expressing what you want to express, than you are concerned about the judgments of others. That's what it means. So I hope this has served you. It's amazing how these situations can feel clear-cut, that you're struggling with something in your life and it's really, really hard, and it just feels that's the end of the story. It's just really hard. Everything sucks. And then you start making up all these details for this story that every detail makes you feel worse, makes you feel more powerless to change anything. It makes you feel like it's too much for you or it's too hard. But you're creating those feelings. You're not responsible for the events or for what anyone else does. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have immense power when it comes to responding to yourself with compassion and support and imagination. You have so much power to change your experience, what it feels like. Those exact same things happening can feel very different to you. If somebody has a story about themselves, I'm very, very good at making money, and they go bankrupt. That's going to be a very different experience from somebody who has a story, I am terrible at making money, and money doesn't come to me easily. If they go bankrupt, you can have two people in the exact same situation. They're both bankrupt. They can have literally the exact same amount of money, wealth, assets, whatever. In fact, you can have one have way less, be in a much worse circumstance when you look at the actual numbers, when you look at the actual situation. But because their story about themselves is different, that experience is going to be different. The person who's bankrupt will go the person who's in a really bad position and bankrupt, who believes they're good at making money, will say, okay, this isn't my dream situation to be in. This is not my ideal life. This is not what I would choose. But it's okay. I'm going to be okay. Let's work on getting back. Whereas the other person might say, my life is over and now I will never have a means to take care of myself or my family. Two very different meanings, exact same circumstances, and it all comes from the story that you are holding on to about yourself. The reason why this seems so hard to change is because people confuse the story that they have about themselves with an objective truth. They will fight. They will fight to defend that story about themselves. They'll say, I'm just being realistic. This is reality. I suck at this. I can't do this. This is impossible for me. They'll have these stories that they fight really hard to defend, and then they'll say, well, because, I believe this because, and they'll back it up. And they believe it. They believe it 100%. They believe it's the truth. That's the thing about a belief. If you believe that, if you have that immense certainty, you can't see that it's a choice, that it's an option, that you can create a new story and a new set of beliefs. You can create a story and beliefs that serve you. And I'm not talking about being completely delusional. So I'm not talking about if you are learning to play classical music and you're at a certain level. I'm not talking about believing that you are the best classical pianist in the whole world. That's not what an empowering story is about. It's not about making stuff up that just isn't true. That's not what it's about. It's about finding the empowering truths that are there. So with any sort of situation, you can look at it lots and lots of different ways. The ways that you choose, you'll have lots and lots of reasons why you say that's just the way it is, but it simply isn't. There are lots of different ways of looking at anything. And the way you look at that situation is going to determine how you feel and how you act. Suppose you have this belief that walking into the road in front of a speeding car will kill you, right? A lot of us have that belief. A lot of us don't do that. A lot of us, and so it affects our actions. Maybe not so much our emotions, because we feel it's easy to not walk in front of a car, and to not step out of a road. But suppose you have this belief, okay, walking in front of a speeding car is going to kill me, and I might unknowingly step out into the road in front of a speeding car anytime I'm outside. If I'm walking down the side of a road, if I'm on the pavement, if I'm on the sidewalk, at any minute I might unwittingly step in front of a car and you get hit by it. If that's your belief, then you'll be walking down the street with some of your friends. They don't have that belief. They don't have that story. So they're just walking, talking fine. And you'll be really, really anxious because at any minute you think you might be inclined to step out into the road. You might forget where you're going, not notice. You'll step out. You're going to be anxious the whole time, right? And then your friends will go, hey, are you okay? They might say that. Are you okay? And like, oh yeah, I'm really worried that I'm going to step into the road and get hit by a car. And your friends might, because that's not their story and that's not their belief and their experience, they'll just be like, hey, yeah, that's not going to happen. But it doesn't matter if they say that's not going to happen, because that's their story and your story is different. Your story is, that could happen. I'm prone to it. I might do it. And then you start thinking about that. And this is how worry works. You're like, actually, there's so many times that I've not noticed where I'm going and ended up bumping into things or not being aware that I've stepped somewhere. There's so many times, and that could happen to me. Like out here, it's really dangerous because I'm beside cars. I'm really prone to that. That could happen. So your story is creating anxiety in the exact same situation that your friends are in. It's not creating anxiety for them. But the reason you have that story is because you believe it's true. You absolutely believe it's true. That's how it works with all the stories that we have about ourselves. We believe it's true, and because those things that we believe that are true are really disempowering stories, you then end up feeling all the feelings of disempowerment. And then because you feel that disempowerment, you act differently. So someone walking down the street in a very hyper-vigilant, anxious state, that sort of internal state is going to have an impact on your health, your long-term health. Now, studies have shown actually that stress is one of the number one factors that affect your health. But you believe this story, you absolutely believe it, and it never occurs to you that actually I'm feeling frustration and anxiety. Maybe I can change my story. What is my story? That doesn't occur to you. When you feel frustration and anxiety, most people just go straight into, they don't even see they have a story. They're just like, well, this is just why I'm feeling frustration and anxiety. There are all these reasons. And you just go into that disempowered emotion mode. And then in that mode, you then behave differently. And the paradox is that the way you behave is always going to align with and support your story that you believe. Belief is powerful. Stories are powerful. Your thoughts are powerful. So if you believe that your life is in danger every moment when you're walking down the sidewalk because you might step out in front of a car, you're thinking that's true, and actually acknowledging that's true, like you're really not willing to let go of that. Acknowledging that's not, like insisting that that's true is actually making you really anxious, tense, hypervigilant. You're actually less able to respond in an intelligent way to an actual endangering situation should you walk into it. You're more likely to panic. You're more likely to freeze. So then your physiological state changes, your response to things changes, and you start co-creating more dangers around you because that's your belief. I hope that makes sense. There's a lot of teaching around this that gets labeled as, law of attraction, manifestation. I've heard, that guy that wrote the Dilbert comics, I've heard him talk about this in terms of like how he's made sense of it. But your brain is like a radar, your subconscious is like a radar, and it seeks out the things that you tell it to seek out. The things it's always seeking out are the beliefs and the thoughts that you feed it. That's what feeds your subconscious. The thoughts you think, the meanings that you give to things. And so you can fight and die on that hill to defend your thoughts and beliefs as the absolute truth. But why would you do that for thoughts and beliefs that are not serving you? Maybe have a think, and you can know which thoughts and beliefs are not serving you. You can you're blind to them, but you can get a pointer to what they are by noticing, what do you get angry about? What do you get frustrated about? What things do you wish you can change? What patterns keep happening in your life that you don't want, that you don't like, that you wish were different? What are those things? When you look at those things, those circumstances, you will always say, oh, it's that circumstance that makes me feel these things, but it's not. It's your story. It's always your story that's making you feel frustrated. You might say it's driving you crazy that your kids don't help out with housework, or they don't listen, they don't do as they're asked. You're experiencing frustration with that. You're not experiencing frustration with your kids doing that thing. If you were totally cool with them doing that thing, you wouldn't be frustrated. You're experiencing frustration because of the stories that you're telling yourself about that they should be doing something else, that they need to be doing something else, that what they're doing is impacting you, that what they're doing is really bad for them. Something about that is like terrible and you need to change it, but you can't. You're trying to do your best, or maybe the story is you're working so hard for them, they're not appreciating it. Maybe the story is they are stubbornly refusing to do what's best for them. And that's not okay. That makes them suffer. And you can't stand that. You can't bear that. What are the stories? If you're frustrated about something, if you're angry about something triggers you, that's always flagging up a limiting belief and a story that isn't serving you. Always, always, always. The problem is not the problem. No matter how much it looks like it's the problem. No matter how much it looks like it's the problem, that is not the problem. Although that thing might also need a very different response in your life, like setting boundaries or whatever, right? Like that example of my client who she was experiencing all this unwanted advice from the colleagues. Well, the unwanted advice is not the cause of her feeling she's a bad mom. She's feeling she's a bad mom because of the meaning she's giving to what they're saying. She's taking what they're saying and saying they're judging me and those judgments are true. That's the meaning she's giving it. Whereas, obviously, a healthier meaning would be, and a more empowering meaning would be, they're saying this stuff, which I don't find particularly helpful. They may or may not be judging me. It's their prerogative to judge me if they want. If they judge me, that's an expression of their limitations. But this thing exists, that they're doing this thing that actually I don't want and I didn't ask for. They're giving me stuff that I did not ask for and I do not want. That situation is true. But what's also true is that, oh, I can respond to that. As soon as you see it as that situation, as opposed to they're judging me and saying I'm a bad mom, your response is going to be different. If the story is, I think that they're trying to be helpful, I'm not sure, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they're trying to be helpful. I think they may even care about me on some sort of a medium sort of connection level. I think they care about me and that I'm having a tough time and they really want to fix this. Yeah. So that's a different story. You also acknowledge, well, they want to fix this. However, I don't want to hear this. And then you act, you take action, you're honest, you are yourself, and you embody the things you want to embody. So what do you want to embody when you speak to them? You might want to embody love, appreciation, kindness. So you say something like, I really appreciate you listening to me and caring and trying to help. I know you're trying to help. But right now, I don't want any advice. I just want to process what's happening. So thank you. Thank you for trying to help. But, I just want you to know I'm not looking for advice right now, and I don't want any from anyone. It's not personal. You always make the first part personal, like the thanks and the appreciation and the validation and affirmation. So your boundaries are never about your doing this wrong. So that's setting a boundary. That's honoring yourself and your needs, being honest about what you want and need in the situation. Yeah. I hope this has served you. If this has brought up anything for you or an example of a way this might apply to your life now or past experiences or anything, I would love to know. Please, leave it in the comments. Or you can join my private Facebook group, which is called Inner Child Healing with Lee Sun. I'll put a link in the description, actually. Request to join. If you request to join, I might send you a message just to see where you're at and to see if the group would be a good place for you to be a member as well. It's free, but yeah, you can message through there or join there, or if I'm organized, I might have contact details below in the description as well. I am actually right now I'm in the process of putting together a website, which even as I say that, my story around that is I'm pretty sure that's really not important to anyone else, but it feels quite important to me right now. It's a big step for me to sort of clarify how I'm showing up, what I'm offering, how I can help, ways that I want to serve So sending you lots of love. Until next time.